Welcome to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast, brought to you by www.legaladviceinparadise.com. Even in one of the most beautiful places in the world, life can be litigious. On this podcast, the best and brightest legal minds gather to help you navigate your way through every legal question you may face. This program will help you know your rights, know what steps to take, and help you find the best legal representation, all in simple, easy to understand terms. And now, here's your host, Justine Gronwald.
Aloha, and thank you for tuning in to our next podcast episode. Want to make sure you never miss an episode, as well as get tips on how to hire an attorney and be eligible for monthly prizes? It's easy. Just join our free membership called the Agent of Change membership. Text your name and your email to area code 808-670-3400. Make sure you text back agree. And also, to check out our past episodes, just log into www.legaladviceinparadisepodcast.com. Now enjoy the next episode. Aloha. Aloha, Agents of Change. This is Justine with Legal Advice in Paradise. Welcome back, and it is my honor and privilege to be talking to attorney Kevin O'Grady. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
I want to thank him for being on this show, and also thank him for his service in the military, for serving our country. And you're going to tell us a little about your service to our country. But I wanted to recognize our sponsor of the show, Green Energy Drink. And Kevin here says he doesn't drink energy drinks, but he went for it this morning.
That's right. That's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. It's all organic, so it's really good. We're going to cover today a topic that everybody should relate to. It's traffic crimes. We have rules and regs out there, people, but what happens if you break them? But before we go into that topic, I would like Kevin to talk a little bit about himself, his service to our country, as well as his practice here in Hawaii. So, Kevin, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from New York. I spent a good number of years in Arizona as well.
Oh.
And I have an undergraduate degree from the University of Arizona. My master's degree is from Chaminade University, which first brought me to Hawaii.
Okay.
And then I have my law degree from Touro Law School in New York. And I knew I did not want to practice in New York as a lawyer, so I practiced in Arizona for a number of years, and then I came here. And it was actually the military that brought me here, along with my wife's job at the time. I've been a city prosecutor and a special assistant United States attorney, and I've been in private practice here in Hawaii since 2009.
Okay.
I joined the military as a judge advocate, a lawyer, in the Army in 2002, and I was put on active duty here in Hawaii from 2006 until the end of 2008. And then I started my practice up here in 2009, and I've been doing that since. I focus on DUIs, traffic crimes, including excessive speeding, which is criminal speeding, essentially. Right. And I do some other crimes, such as assault and things like that. And I do, as well, courts-martial. But as I'll explain in a little bit, I don't do Army courts-martial anymore. And I'll explain why in just in a few minutes.
Sure. Okay. So essentially, we want to define what a traffic crime is. We all know, we all have an idea because there's, the traffic speed limits and whatnot. But define for us what a traffic crime is, if there's several different kinds or it's just speeding. And then from there, we want to talk about what the consequences are. And of course, if people find themselves in that situation, how do you help?
Sure.
So let's start with the definition of a traffic crime.
Well, Hawaii is unique because it's created something in addition to regular crimes. But most people think of felonies, which is something that is punishable by more than a year in jail. And usually you go to prison as opposed to a jail. Then there's misdemeanors, which have jail time associated with it. And you can go to jail for a few days or up to possibly a year. And here in Hawaii, once you get past 6 months, you also are entitled to a jury trial. And here in Hawaii, we have felonies, we have misdemeanors, and we have what are called petty misdemeanors. And petty misdemeanor is a Hawaii creation in an attempt to take away the right to a jury trial. So the jail time is minimized so that it's not required by law to give you a jury trial. And then Hawaii did another thing. They created what's called a criminal violation. If you talk to certain people, they'll refer to moving violations as decriminalized traffic infractions. And what that means is, a long time ago, a simple speeding ticket was a crime. But because the courts were inundated with people doing all sorts of so they very quickly decided that, well, that's not going to work. And a lot of states have done that, and what they do is they call them moving violations. Well, Hawaii, in addition to having decriminalized moving violations, we also have criminal violations, which is an odd beast. What that is it's a crime, but there's no jail attached to it. The best way to think about this is, if you were doing 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, and you went to court and you said, Your Honor, I was speeding, I was doing 5 over. And he says, okay, do you admit or deny? And so you say, I admit. So that's civil responsibility. I admit. Now, if there's a criminal violation, for example, what was a criminal violation that the state recently changed? The use of your cell phone.
Oh, you can't be on your cell phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
The use of a mobile electronic device while in your car. For a time, it was a criminal violation. Now it's a decriminalized infraction. So you admit or deny. But last year, it was a criminal violation. So although there was no jail attached to it, the judge did not ask you, do you admit or deny? It was, do you plead guilty or not?
Wow.
So there's always questions that people ask about, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean for my job? What does that mean for my driver's license? And your driver's license, the Motor Vehicle Bureau may look at it in a different way depending upon whether or not you have a Hawaii driver's license or some out-of-state driver's license. Where it comes up most importantly for people in the military is if they have a secret or a top-secret clearance. Having something on your record that says guilty of anything, that's a bad thing.
It's a very bad thing.
For other people's jobs, it may come into play as well. If you're a licensed nurse or something else like that, writing down that you were found guilty of something is usually not a good thing. Now, it may not necessarily, they may not take your license away from being a nurse or something, but it's something that you would have to put down. As opposed to, there's usually a broader category of, do you have any moving violations? Well, anything that you admit to, 5 miles an hour over, a parking ticket, that's a moving violation. So this unusual item of a criminal violation where there's no jail, but it's considered a crime, is unique to Hawaii, I think. I haven't run into it before. And I advise my clients that they just want to stay away from anything that involves the word guilty, unless they don't mind having that in their record. My clients come to me because they don't like having the word guilty on their record.
Yeah, and like you said, that could affect their career, their jobs.
It is possible.
Right?
If you drive for a living or something else like that, now, some people take it with a grain of salt. They know that legislatures kind of go crazy and they make all these things crimes. And so if somebody says, oh, you were convicted of something, what were you convicted of? I was using my cell phone. Some people will say, okay, whatever, you're still hired, and it won't matter. But for some people, it can be an impediment. So it is something to consider. There's all sorts of moving violations in the traffic code that the police are trained in, and they will very exactingly look at people in an effort to try and pull them over. One thing that gets a lot of people here is the solid white line.
Oh, that's right. You're not supposed to cross.
The way the statute is written is it says that you should be especially cautious. However, the way the police officers interpret it is if it's a solid white line, you shall never cross it, and they will pull you over.
It's kind of like the double yellow line.
Well, double yellow line, you're not supposed to cross.
Yeah, but they treat it like it's a no-no. I mean, absolutely. Right.
And a solid white line, they will pull you over if you cross over it, even if you do it in a safe fashion. And then you can get a lawyer like myself to argue, well, it was done in a safe fashion, there are no other cars out on the road, etc. But the officers, I've interviewed them at different court proceedings and what have you, and by and large, they are all taught that thou shalt not cross over the solid white line ever.
Wow.
And they will pull you over if they're in the mood.
Well, what's the penalty for crossing over? I mean,
it's a moving violation. It's like $100 or something.
Okay, so the fine is about $100.
Right.
And typically people don't hire you for a small fine like that, or they do?
The system, okay, you have to understand that the system has been geared to make things easy for the government to do a couple of things. One, the system has been geared to try and get revenue coming in, okay, in the way of traffic tickets. And the other thing is they don't want to make every case a federal case. They don't want the guy who says that he changed lanes in a safe fashion to take up the whole day at
Right,
court.
it's going to clog everything up, yeah.
So the way the system is geared here, and we'll talk about moving violations for just a minute, is you get the traffic ticket, and on the back of the ticket, there's a little form. You have three options. Your option number one is, I admit, here's my check, I pay. The second one is, I admit with an explanation, otherwise known as, still admitting. And so you send in a letter or some pictures of your parking space or something else like that. I have found that that usually works if you have a decent explanation and perhaps it's speeding. So you say, oh, I admit I was speeding, but I wasn't doing 20 over, I was only doing 10. And the judge looks at that and he says, okay. And so he finds you responsible for 1 to 10 miles an hour over as opposed to 11 to 20. That lessens your fine. The third item is, I want a hearing, I deny it. If you do that, the first hearing you go to, there's no police officer and there's no prosecutor. It's you, the judge, and the ticket. And the judge will say, okay, I'm looking at the ticket, and what do you have? What do you have to say about this? Now, when the judge is looking at the ticket, what he's supposed to be doing is he's supposed to be looking for obvious fatal flaws in the ticket. The police officer forgot to mark something off that just the ticket alone doesn't prove the case. And so if that's the case, you win.
Okay.
Also, he's going to look at the ticket and he's going to listen to what you have to say. But bear in mind that because it's decriminalized and it's a moving violation, the standard is preponderance of the evidence, which means 51-49. So if
on whose side?
Well, whoever gets 51
okay.
wins.
Okay.
Whoever gets 51. Now the burden is on the government. Okay, so they have to get to 51.
Okay.
So if the officer writes a complete ticket and the judge says, "Well, I'm not sure I believe you," I'm going to rule in favor of the state because he's proven to me just enough, 51-49.
Okay, I
then,
see what you
then
mean.
the state wins. And at that point, you are also entitled to request what's called a trial de novo. De novo just means new. So if you request it, and there is a time period, so my recommendation would be to request it that day, you then get another date.
Wow.
Now, at that date, the prosecutor is going to be there. The police officer is going to be there.
Wow.
The officer has to testify. You're able to cross-examine the officer. And if you want, you can testify. And, of course, you would be subject to cross-examination as well.
So you're there by yourself if you go by yourself.
Right. And you can hire an attorney, and there are some attorneys that assist with this. But bearing in mind that a moving violation may have a fine of $80 to $200, a lot of people, when push comes to shove, I mean, I don't know what the attorneys are charging, but most attorneys don't charge less than $100 to go to a court.
Yeah, I know what the average billable rates are now.
Well, and even so, the billable rates here are somewhat less than market value. There are attorneys here that undercharge at, say, $100, $200 an hour, when really they should be charging $200, $300, $400 an hour.
Right, that's the average right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So you might be able to, the people that come to me for that moving violation either can't have the moving violation because they have a top secret clearance, or they are just, no, the officer is wrong. This is a matter of the officer's wrong and I'm right. And I don't care if it's a $100 fine. I didn't do that, and I'm willing to pay $500 or $1,000 or $1,500 to fight it because he's lying, or I just don't want it done. That, it's a matter of personal integrity to them.
How often do you find that?
Usually the people that come to me have top secret clearances.
Oh, okay.
In Arizona, the other state where I practiced, I had a couple of people that they thought the officer was wrong, and they took measurements and pictures, and to them it was a matter of a personal affront that the officer accused them of it, and they were willing to go to court for it.
Yeah.
So
go the extra mile.
That's right, they are. But by and large, a lot of people will handle them on their own.
Right.
And my advice is, I'm okay. I can do that. It requires trial tactics. It requires going to court. I'm okay with doing that, but you have to bear in mind a couple of things. One, you have to pay the attorney. And two, this is not a criminal trial. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's preponderance of the evidence. So if we really crucify the officer on cross-examination, it might still be government 51, U49,
wow.
Because it's a moving violation.
Right.
It's not a crime. So it's not horribly difficult for them to prove. So a lot of people, they say, okay, fine, and they write the check to the government. And so, I mean, but it's their choice.
Right. Well, that's interesting because, that's a little bit more complex than I thought about a moving violation. But you said this is all new changes.
Well, no, the Decriminalized has been around for, I think, more than a decade. I wasn't practicing here in Hawaii that long ago, but I know when I look at some of the cases a long time ago, they were crimes. But I think the state very quickly figured out that we can't have every speeding over 5 miles an hour be a full-blown trial.
It's
Everybody
just too
will
much.
drown in the system, right?
Right. So if somebody finds himself in this situation, say, they were in a hurry, I mean, that's not an excuse, or just that they weren't paying attention and they get caught speeding. What was the definition of where it's criminal speeding, and what was the other one we discussed prior to going on the air? I think it was the where they went excessive speeding.
Excessive speeding is criminal speeding.
Okay.
The state of Hawaii calls criminal speeding excessive speeding. If you look in the statute books, it's called excessive speeding.
Okay.
I guess the idea is speeding, 5 over, 10 over, 15 over is regular speeding.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering how many miles per hour over is considered criminal.
Just under excessive speeding, the statutory definition is either over 80 miles an hour anywhere on the island.
80 miles per hour?
And I should say in the state, not just on this island. So it isn't county specific. So if you do 82 or 81, that's excessive speeding. Or more than 30 miles an hour over the posted speed limit.
So say it's a 25 mile per hour.
And you're doing 60.
Right.
That's excessive speeding.
And what does it carry with it?
Excessive speeding is a petty misdemeanor, which again means you are not entitled to a jury trial. It's a judge alone. It's punishable by jail time and a license suspension and up to $1,000 in fines, plus associated court costs and add-ons and things that they do.
So if somebody is caught for that kind of speeding, excessive speeding, where do you come in? Because obviously they're going to serve somehow time.
No.
What? No?
No. Although it's punishable by jail time, first of all, it's not punishable by a lot of jail time. If I remember correctly, it's only punishable by about 5 days.
5 days for speeding. Wow.
Criminal speeding. Excessive speeding. Excessive speeding. But everything has to be taken into account. It is authorized up to 5 days in jail. But these judges see a lot of people who are speeding, whether they're doing regular speeding or excessive speeding. And it is possible that you may find a judge on a particular day and under your particular circumstances that he feels like throwing you in jail if you're found guilty for a weekend. That may be, which is why it's worth it to fight it. To me, anyway.
I see. Okay.
However, truth be told, first-time offense, you're doing 85 on the H3. The chances of the judge actually putting you into jail is nominal because there are far other greater crimes out there and probably far other worse excessive speeders. You start coming back 2 and 3 times with excessive speeding in a year.
I was going to say if they get the revolving door of a habitual
speeding, or something else that really catches the eye, because remember here, even on the Big Island, we're on an island, and everybody drives a lot slower than they do on the mainland, and the speed limits, especially on this island, are set a lot lower. So triple digits catches both the prosecutor's eye and the judge's eye. Well, sure, you get a lot of guys, for whatever reason.
Fast and Furious.
Well, they get a straightaway, either up by the pineapple fields or over by the H3 or the H1 by the airport.
There.
Well, sometimes there isn't anybody there. It's the middle of the night, and there's a straightaway, and it doesn't take much to get up to 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, especially you have a fast car or a motorcycle. And maybe they're used to driving in the middle of the desert in Arizona or the Autobahn or California, for goodness sake. And they just got out of hand because they felt it was a nice, beautiful night. And boom, they were at 105.
Wow.
That catches the attention of the prosecutor, and that also catches the attention of the judge. If you're found guilty there, again, none of my clients have seen jail for excessive speeding. I don't have that many that have been convicted either, but the point remains, it's unlikely the first time that they're going to do that. But I have seen a couple people who have gotten a second or a third excessive speeding and wound up, the judge says, hey, I'm going to throw you in jail.
Because you just got to learn your lesson. Now, when I was in my 20s, this is my story. My mother-in-law at the time, she bought a brand new red Mustang. And I came home. I lived all the way on the west side. I was late for modeling class. Hello. And so I'm going that same place, that airport, that drive. And I guess it wasn't during high volume traffic. So I wasn't paying attention. So I got pulled on the side. I think it was for like 76, 78.
And a 55?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, of course, I had to go to court, and the judge made me go to driving class,
Right.
and pay my fine. And the bailiff said he was pretty stiff on me for a first offense. So it really is up to the judge what he wants to do.
Sure, within the realm authorized by within the range authorized by the legislature for the crime, yes, it is up to the judge.
And then they told me if I missed any of those classes, which were so many Saturdays on a weekend, you had to go consecutively, you could be put on for bench warrants.
Right.
And so is that still existing that today? Because this happened to me like in the early 80s, so it's been a while.
Well, I can't speak to what was happening in the 80s as I wasn't practicing back then.
But what is it like today?
Well, today, if you're found guilty of, for example, I do a lot of DUIs. If you're found guilty of DUI and you don't appeal it, and you're sentenced to whatever, alcohol assessment on a driver's education course, for example, you are now hip deep in the system. And what I mean by that is, if you have to go to these things are, like the rest of the system, inundated with a number of people. So if you were convicted today and the judge said, well, you have to go to this driver's education course, and you called driver's education today, you would probably not be able to get into a driver's education course until November, December.
Wow.
Because they're backlogged. So, and you have 6 months to accomplish it.
Wow.
So if you called today and you're going to be seeing it in November or December, imagine if you said, oh man, I'm really depressed, and you don't call them for 2 months.
Right.
Now you're really behind the power curve.
Well, what happens to you then if you don't
You
fulfill
show
it
up to
within
court.
6 months?
Well, they have what's called a proof of compliance hearing. Have you done what you're supposed to do? And when you go there and you say, oh, well, and you provide, now you're telling the judge, I didn't call as soon as I should have, and he's going to hopefully allow you another opportunity to complete that. You just don't want to be back in front of the judge all the time asking for more continuances.
Well, do they advise you and say, hey, look, I need you, it's mandatory that you go to these classes, but you better do it now because there is a backlog? Do they tell
some
people
judges
that?
Some judges will say that, and if you have an attorney, judges will say that. The attorney may tell you that as well. He might say, get on it right now. Some attorneys do not do proof of compliance hearings. I don't do proof of compliance hearings, but that's because I don't plead people guilty to DUIs either, but at any rate. So for people who have been found guilty who don't appeal, that have to do this, yeah, I would tell them, hey, if you're not going to appeal this, you need to comply with the court's orders and you need to get on it now. Then it's that client's responsibility to handle that. And for my service members, what I try to do, because excessive speeding does come up with them now and again, if for some reason, here's what happens with mine. If I can convince the prosecutor that they don't want to deal with me, and so turn it into a simple moving violation. What they will ask for, okay, fine, it's a simple moving violation, but I want him to do a driver's education course, like you said.
Right.
Now, the driver's education course is, again, very backlogged. But most of the military services have the ability to do similar driver's education courses online through the military.
Online.
So what I do is, if I'm going to get my client a moving violation, I ask on the record in court, I say, well, can this also be accomplished through the military? And the judge says, yes, that's fine. Boom. Then instead of dealing with the state and the backlog state, he goes back to his work, he knocks it out, he can knock it out in less than a week.
Wow.
He brings me proof, he brings the court proof, and then all he has to do is pay the fine.
Yeah, because I remember from driving course, they show you these horrific videos of people who sped and families that were killed and destroyed. I mean, it's very impactful. And, to tell you the truth, I thought about driving a whole different way after that. I mean, I use my blinkers all the time. I'm very mindful about how I drive. So, to me, that comes in handy for the ones who learn a lesson, that is. Because the habitual ones, of course, they have to learn the hard way.
Right.
So why don't you go over different penalties? I mean, for different, offenses?
Well, I don't have them all memorized, but
typically
DUI has jail time associated with it, up to $1,000 fine. There's a minimum, I think, $250, maybe $150 fine. Alcohol assessment, alcohol treatment if necessary, and driver's education course in order to get your driver's license back. With DUI, one of the more significant penalties is actually an administrative penalty, which is revocation of your
Right.
driver's license.
Yeah, we went over that in my other episodes, and I was surprised that there was like an admin side of it.
There is. And
So
again,
you got to deal with two different sides.
yes, the state has two different opportunities to get your license, one at the criminal court and the other on the administrative side.
Right.
And you have to
Yeah.
fight both of them.
Yeah. And say if you get caught for speeding and it had no alcohol involved, I mean, you know,
Simple speeding?
no, the ones
Oh,
that,
excessive
yeah,
speeding.
excessive speeding. Because I see, I don't know if it happens so much now, but you know, movies like Fast and Furious kind of get people going, and
Yes.
they soup up their cars. And like you said, oh, here's another thing I wanted to ask you. There's what I've seen in the past is these motorcyclists, and they're doing like crazy things, they're speeding in and out. Have you ever had to represent those where there's like speed demons? They're just weaving in and out, going like 90 miles per hour.
Well, it depends what they're charged with, okay? You could be doing 60 in a 55 zone, okay, which is just simple speeding. But whether it be with a car or a motorcycle, you could be weaving in and out of traffic in such a way that the prosecutor may decide to charge you with reckless driving.
Reckless. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
Reckless. Yeah.
Reckless driving is its own crime, and they would have to prove that under the particular circumstances, whatever they were, that you were driving reckless. And excessive speeding is different because if you're doing 100, if there's any cars around, you necessarily have to go around them.
Yeah.
But usually they charge, well, sometimes they'll charge both reckless and excessive, but a lot of times they'll just charge the excessive because it's cleaner. Because if they can prove the speed, they've got you. They don't have to go into the nuances of whether or not it was reckless.
What about those guns? How do
The
they
laser guns.
Yeah, the laser guns. How do they use that in court, or do they?
They do, and the fight over the laser gun has been very particular here in Hawaii. I actually won a case at the Hawaii Supreme Court earlier this year that has set them on their heels.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast. For more information, visit www.legaladviceinparadise.com.